My name is Jason Spruill, and I'm going to do my persuasive speech on the death penalty and my view on it. I did my informative speech on the death penalty, and I didn't really give an honest opinion on it. Hopefully, throughout this speech, I'll prove why it's the right thing to do for anyone that kills anybody. They should be put to death. I heard Ron White say one time um, that a lot of states are abolishing the death penalty, and he said that he's from Texas and they actually use it. Even better, he goes on and says that if more than 3 people see you kill someone, you don't sit on death row for 20 years, you go straight to the front of the line. He finished this saying the slogan for Texas is, if you kill someone, then we will kill you back. um, the first source that I'm using is from listverse.com. It's arguments for and against the death penalty. I used this on the other one also, but I'm just using the ones. This is about the pros and cons of the death penalty, except I'm just going to talk about the pros this time. The first pro is it's the ultimate warning to others that if you kill someone, then you'll get the same fate. If you take away the death penalty, then what difference does it make to a criminal who's robbing someone? They can kill them and end up sitting in prison for life, or they can just rob them and end up sitting in prison for life. If the punishment is no different, then what's stopping the criminal from doing it? To me, that's a big reason to keep it. Make the criminal think a little bit harder about what they're doing. The next one is it helps the family with closure. It doesn't completely wipe out the feeling of loss for the family, but it does help to believe that there's no way that the person will get out and come after them or anybody else in the future. as long as they're sitting in prison, the family always has that what if feeling. Another pro that this website is talking about, it says that it's all that a would-be criminal could fear. Like Ted Bundy, the article says, he could have killed himself a month before his execution, but he didn't because he feared death. He didn't think he was a bad person, and right before his execution, he claimed he did nothing wrong. He wasn't afraid of spending life in prison, but he was afraid of death. The death penalty is not always as cruel as the people who are against it says it is. According to the article, in 2013, 1,328 executions. Out of 1,328 executions, there were only 10 accidents, and that's been since 1976. The 5 methods of execution are relatively quick and painless deaths. In my opinion, the murderer should suffer the same type of killing that they did to their victim, unless there was cannibalism or something like that involved. The methods are hanging, the electric chair, firing squad, lethal injection, which is the most commonly used form now, and the gas chamber, which is no longer used. A good example of someone sitting in prison for far too long, waiting to be executed, is Clarence Ray Allen. This is another source. It comes from listverse.com, and it's the story is Controversial American Executions. Between 1974 and 77, he was involved in 8 armed robberies of homes and businesses in California. Him and 4 accomplices robbed a friend's grocery store called Fran's Market. Afterwards, one of the accomplices, who was 17 at the time, told the owner's son that he was responsible for the robbery. This made Allen very angry, and he told another accomplice to kill her or else. So he strangled her and dumped her body in a canal, which they have never found. He was then arrested after a robbery at Kmart Whitwer home. After his arrest, he was linked to the murder of the 17-year-old and sentenced to life in prison instead of being executed. While he was in prison, he was 50 years old. He made friends with another con who was about to be released on parole. Wanting revenge, he asked for him to kill the 8 witnesses who testified against him. On September 5th, 1980, the man and his girlfriend went to that first grocery store Allen had robbed and used a sawed-off shotgun and shot and killed 3 people. There was one person hiding in the washroom who survived and later identified the shooters, the two shooters. The girlfriend was given a life sentence and the man was given the death penalty, as well as Allen for plotting to have this done. For the next 23 years he sat on death row watching 3 different execution dates pass by. As he got older he could no longer walk and was confined to a wheelchair. Also, thanks to advanced diabetes, he became legally blind. On September 2nd, 2005, he suffered a heart attack and survived. His lawyers tried arguing that it was cruel to put an old man to death. Well, the court didn't agree, and despite being old and frail, he was executed by lethal injection on January 17, 2006. It was the day after his 76th birthday. My point for that reference is that if they hadn't let him sit in prison for that long, there could have been many other lives saved. But because he was friends with other inmates who were getting out, they went on to kill other people and have their own lives put in jeopardy as well by killing people and having the life sentence or the death penalty given to them. They should have, in my opinion, executed him long before any of that happened. If the ultimate punishment is going to be the death penalty, then I believe they should do it sooner rather than later. There's no reason to be sitting on death row for so many years. Another example of someone who should have been executed the first time around, and it would have saved other lives, is Ian McLaughlin. This comes from the same website, and the story is 10 evil killers who should have stayed behind bars. In October 1984, McLaughlin was convicted for killing someone by beating him with a hammer. He received 10 years for manslaughter. When he was released in 1995, he stabbed a 56-year-old barman in the neck. This time he got a life sentence with parole in 25 years. On July 12, 2013, he was on day release getting ready for his parole when he went to the home of an 86-year-old child molester he had spent time in prison with. He tried to rob the old man, but ended up facing him and his neighbor. He solved that problem by dragging the neighbor into the kitchen and stabbing him in the neck until he died. He fled but was arrested and given another life sentence and will be eligible for parole again when he's 95. In my opinion, on this one, he should have been put to death the first time back in 84, and it again could have saved many lives. The next source is an article from warriorblogspot.com, which is Executions Deter Murder. All I'm really going to take off of this is what Paul Rubin's testimony was. An overview of the new sophisticated studies was given by economist Paul H. Rubin in testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Property Rights on February 1st of this year. This is what his testimony was. The bottom line, we now have an impressive body of evidence that the death penalty does deter murders. To make the argument for the death penalty, it's not even necessary to argue that we know that the death penalty deters murders. It's only necessary to argue that it might. If it might, then failure to execute murderers is a form of reckless endangerment, putting at risk the lives of innocent people who might be saved. The next source that I'm using from this is an article from Gallup.com. It's a poll called Americans II Top Reason Death Penalty. They say more than 63% of Americans still support the death penalty, and 35% of them use the phrase "an eye for an eye" as their reasoning. I completely agree with that. As Ron White said in the beginning of my speech, if you kill someone in my state, we will kill you back. So in closing on this subject, my view on this, and I hope the view of others, is that it's definitely necessary to use the death penalty. If someone commits the act of murder, then they should have the same thing done to them. I believe that the death penalty sometimes does deter criminals, or at least make them think about it more before they commit murder. Thank you for listening to my speech, and have a great day.